Welcome to another edition of Viper's Voices for Murphy Batista LLP Personal Injury Lawyers. My guest this week, Darion Hanson, who many of you remember. It was a small sample size, only here for a few months, but boy, Darion, you left a heck of an impact. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to be here, Graham. Thank you.
We've had a chance to catch up before. I've done some podcasts or interviews with you before, and you're a great guy to get a chance to talk to. Lots of interests, but not everybody knows the backstory. Not everybody knows the history. You were here for a couple of months. You ended up starting, 21, 22 games plus playoffs, so just under 40. And then you were gone and you left such a big impact. But let's go back to the beginning. East Bethel, Minnesota. For those of us who are ignorant to Minnesota geography, whereabouts is East Bethel, Minnesota?
East Bethel is just a small town, about 45 minutes north of Minneapolis. So I basically consider myself Minneapolis for the people that are not familiar with the area.
That would have been nice to know during broadcast too, just in point of references, just in case. What's interesting, and I was thinking about this right before we got started, and we'll go through your minor hockey days and all the way through, but born in 1997. At the time, Minnesota did not have an NHL franchise. A few years earlier, they'd moved from Minnesota to Dallas. 3 years, I guess you would have been 3, maybe 4 years old. The Wild come into account. Was that where you truly picked it up? Or at that point, was Minnesota still sort of a hockey state and people were still playing whether or not there was an NHL franchise there or not?
Yeah, no, so it's, obviously Minnesota does have a rich hockey culture. Playing the game hasn't really been in my family history. Both my parents have been interested. I know my mom actually got my name Darion, apparently from Darion Hatcher, who played with the North Stars at the time. And like I said, she didn't care so much about the hockey part, more so just the name. She liked it. So, that's just kind of a fun tidbit I like to tell people sometimes. But no, the interest just kind of sparked, from going to school and having friends that played and them having parents that played. And like I said, it's Minnesota. So you got a ton of lakes that are always frozen all year long. So it's just easy for us to get out there. And I guess that's just really where the interest started.
It's sort of an underrated part of growing up in Minnesota is the weather. My goodness, there are a lot of great hockey players that come out of that state for obvious reasons. But how much of an impact did playing on frozen ponds and frozen lakes have on you growing up? It's sort of like, yeah, you get 2 to 3 ice times a week, but now you've got access to nature that'll sort of take care of you.
Well, it's funny that you say weather is the underrated part. I'd actually say that's the worst part. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the weather in Minnesota, but you basically get the worst of every season. So, but no, before the winter part though, absolutely being able to have access to the outdoor arenas and things of that nature, absolutely had an advantage for me in that. Like when it comes to just organized youth sports too, I remember having a handful of practices a year just out at the outdoor rink, right behind our indoor rink, just for fun. And, growing up there too, it's on the weekends, it's, hey guys, not much else to do than let's go to the pond and rip around a little bit. So absolutely that did have not so much, I'd say, an impact on my development, but just more so in developing my interest in the game.
It's always interesting to talk about goalies and how they end up in the position. Unfortunately, I have a 7-year-old who is very interested in the position. The worst part is, he's probably going to cap out at 5'9", which isn't always conducive to a successful goalie career. But what was it like for you? Was it something that you always wanted to do, or was it something that you gravitated towards as you got a bit older?
Well, that's actually a funny story. This is what my dad tells me, at least. Apparently, my interest in playing goalie kind of stemmed from the Olympics in Salt Lake City. No, was that 2002? I believe, yep. So 2002, I would have been 5 at the time. Apparently, one of it was because I just thought that the different helmets that the goalies wore was cool. And I thought it was cool how they could just drink water in the middle of the play or whatever like that. So that was a part of it. So I've always been interested. But I think the other part, apparently, and this is what my mom tells me, was that I was just a very competitive kid at a young age, and we were just playing, just like termite hockey, just half ice, whatever. And apparently my goalie one day wasn't very good, and we were losing by a lot of goals, and I had a tough time losing. So I just went in and started playing goalie, and I was pretty good. So I was like, hell, I'll stick with it. So thank goodness I did.
Yeah. Who knew the decisions when you were in termite could impact the way essentially your whole life goes. I mean, what's the minor hockey system like in Minnesota? I would imagine, again, big, like lots of people. It's probably one of the more popular sports because it does, operate around a weather pattern that works out pretty well. In comparison to maybe Canada of some kind, is it probably one of those minor hockey organizations that is as strong as they come?
Yeah, it's not different in the sense of just the structure of how it works. You got mites, squirts, peewees. I mean, we have different names for it all, but I think the difference is mainly what you said is it's just big. Like I said, I grew up kind of in a relatively small town that was still outside of Minneapolis. And usually in areas where hockey isn't so big, those towns need to, combine with other cities to have a functioning program. And in Minnesota, you don't necessarily need that. So we are able to have strong youth programs in places that might not otherwise be strong in other areas of the country. And I think that also translates a little bit more to Minnesota high school hockey, which, I mean, I think people even up in Canada are probably familiar. Like it's very popular, and one of the very few states in the United States where it's so popular. And I just think, again, that kind of stems on smaller towns are able to compete and put kids on the ice and have people come out to watch the games and just support each other. So like I said, I think that's just the main difference is just, the popularity is all.
And it's pretty interesting to think, I just had this flashback to, the original Mighty Ducks movie where it was in Minnesota and Gordon Bombay and all of that sort of thing. And it was, it's a movie and it's made by Disney, but there's probably quite a bit of accuracy to, what hockey means in a community like that, just by simply watching part of that film where, they take it so seriously there from the grassroots level all the way up.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I don't remember all the details of that movie, but I do know that the rink that actually was filmed in, it's no longer in business, I believe, but the building's still there. And it's just kind of like, Minnesota mythology. Every time you walk or drive by it, that's the Mighty Ducks rink. But you also see it, culturally too. Like I see it, the movie Miracle, like Herb Brooks, obviously being from Minnesota, and that 1980 Olympics team having a lot of Minnesotans on it. And that's just something, that people from our state really take pride in. So it's cool. It is very cool. And I've been away from it for a while now, but it's something I'll never forget.
We're going to quickly divert away from hockey for a second. I need to know the truth to this. Minnesotans always get chirped, made fun of for being so darn friendly all the time. Fargo doesn't do it any justice, I'm sure. Is that true? Like, walk us behind the stigma of Minnesotans, because you're obviously very friendly, and every person from that state that's been through here, at least the Viper program, always very friendly. Is that something that you get even when you leave Minnesota?
It's just different for me, and I've been lucky enough to just live in a lot of places where there's a lot of different people, and I wouldn't say it's so much just strictly in Minnesota. I think it's just a general Midwestern United States, just kind of a hospitality thing. We're just a lot slower, more easygoing. I live in New York now, so I'm out here in New York, and it's just, you can tell the pace is a little bit quicker. People, when you're saying goodbye, we have this thing called Minnesota goodbyes at home where, you're at a family dinner or whatever, and you say, all right, it's time for me to go. And they don't leave for 40 minutes because you don't want them to feel bad. So, but here it's like, all right, I'm out, see ya. So it's just like little weird things like that. And I don't know what the answer is. All I know is that that's kind of what I see. Whether it's true, that's up to everyone else. Because I'm sure there's mean Minnesotans out there too, right?
Well, for sure. It seems very Canadian too. I think a lot of Canadians can agree with the Minnesotan goodbye. As we sort of go through it in 2011, 2012, you talked about playing high school. When it comes to those programs, is there a recruitment process, or is it based on geography where you happen to live? So, you ended up at St. Francis. is the high school programs, are they based on recruitment like a lot of levels, or is it one of those, you happen to be within a catchment and that's where you're going no matter
so
what?
No, actually in Minnesota, recruiting for high schools is actually very illegal. You're not allowed to do that. So you're supposed to play for your local organization. There is kind of a loophole there where if you do choose to go to a private school, you can play for the private school teams. So just in Minnesota, that's kind of bred like a historical kind of rivalry between the privates and the publics, because us public kids, like you got to pay to go to a private school and get on a really good team, but we have to stay here. So that's always a rivalry there. But usually typically you play for your local city. So
What was it like at St. Francis? I mean, as we look through your timeline, your goals against average and save percentage are extremely good, essentially from years 2013, 14, all the way through till present day. But those 2 years at high school, and again, we're just going by the numbers that we're able to track down, not so good. So what was it like playing at St. Francis? And was it still an opportunity for you to get recognized and noticed?
Well, actually, I look back at those days, and it's playing high school hockey is a really unique experience, and it's one that I still really value, because you're playing games with kids that you've been growing up with since you were 6 years old. So that was very cool. The numbers weren't there. I think probably, I don't even remember this is so long. I think in part the statistics I don't think are entirely accurate, but I'm not saying that I was lighting it up. Don't get me wrong. We weren't the greatest team in the world. I was seeing a lot of shots. And I think that was honestly very good for me personally in my development, is that usually historically in my hometown in St. Francis, I was seeing a lot of shots. So the case went right all the way up to when I was in high school, which obviously, like you mentioned, the numbers do reflect that. But even all that put aside, it's the one thing that's great about high school hockey is that it's more than just the numbers and moving on. There's a lot of, cool life experiences that you get out of it as well.
Internally too, it had to be pretty neat to play. You always like to play high school sports, like pretty much anywhere you get a chance to play in front of your friends and your family, and you represent your school. But as competitive as you say it was in terms of rivalries with the public schools and the private schools, and I imagine schools in those areas are quite a bit larger than hypothetically here in Vernon. The schools I would imagine are a lot bigger, and to be a major component and play in 21 and 25 games, what did that do for you to help you prepare? I mean, playing in front of what we'd imagine to be full crowds, even if the team's not that great, has to be a big part of the experience.
Absolutely. And it's, there are schools that attract more people to games than others. And for me, it's a huge part of even just my path along to where I've got to now. Had a lot to do with playing those big time, well-known private schools, because those are the schools where, and I'm sure we might even get down to this part a little bit later, but that's where I first started getting exposure to junior teams and whatnot. And getting to do that, obviously the exposure, long story short, ended up getting me to playing midget in Omaha and then to junior and all that. So yes, the short answer to your question is, it was extremely important.
When, and I'm just assuming the numbers, I'm not great at math.
Yeah.
You do 2 years at St. Francis. Those weren't your graduation years, obviously. Those were well before. So you make the jump to play midget in Omaha. Mm-hmm. That's the first time you've left home, I would imagine, for other than road trips, at 15, 16 years old, fair to say. Mm-hmm. How was the experience? Who helped you, and how nervous were you to make the jump? Because again, we're not all, up to date on geography, but right. Omaha, Nebraska is not super close, is it, to Minnesota?
No, it's about a 7-hour drive from where I am. So how that actually came about was during my second year in St. Francis, I was actually ended up getting listed with the Portland Winterhawks in the Western League. And I'm sure everyone out in Vernon's familiar with the Western League. And through just kind of my connections with the team in Portland, they had connections with David Wilkie, who was the head coach and just overall manager of the Omaha AAA hockey organization. And for me, being from a small town, I was kind of ready to take that next step to that program, which at the time was one of the best midget programs in the country. So that was just really an opportunity I couldn't pass up. We were just playing a lot more games. I think ended up playing like 70. I didn't play in them all, but we ended up playing like 72 games there compared to like the 25 in Minnesota. And just for me in my specific situation at the time, it just made sense to go the midget route rather than stay at high school, as much as I loved high school. So yeah, that's basically through Portland from St. Francis. That's where I ended up in Nebraska when I was about 16. My junior year of high school was.
What part of you, and back then when you're 16 years old and you sort of got this contact through the Western Hockey League, were you familiar with the rules when it came to NCAA eligibility and playing in the Western League, and the fact that once you played a game, you weren't able to go back? Did you sort of have it in your mind that you wanted to do college hockey, or were you sort of the play it by ear and see what opportunities present themselves? Or were you aware of the decisions at 16 years old that you were going to have to make in the next year or so?
Yes, I was actually very aware of those decisions. Minnesota actually has a long history of a lot of kids, good players, going from Minnesota opting to go to the Western League instead of college. I have a lot of good friends that have done that too. So I was very aware of the decisions, but I've also was kind of aware of some of the horror stories where kids may have overstayed a visit for an extra day or two and lost eligibility, things of that nature. So me at that time, I was aware of that part. Me being a 16-year-old kid at the time, I was dead set on going to play in the Western League. It just never ended up happening. And in hindsight now, as a 23-year-old, I think that was best for me. I think for me as a player and as a person, the college route just fits me and my needs much better. But having that said, like, that kind of came to me almost as a second option. So yeah.
It's funny. We see, usually when we see American players come through here, college is all they've ever thought about. It's all they've really wanted to do. Their goal was to try to figure out a way to get from playing high school hockey and find their way into the college level, no matter which way, whether it's coming out to BC or playing in the junior leagues in the United States. Was there a time where you sort of recognized that was going to be the case? Because again, you spent, 2 years with Omaha and worked your way through there. Then, you bounced around a couple of times in the year after in junior, though. Was that still, was college still the goal? Or what point did you decide that college was going to be the route you wanted to take?
It's funny, actually, to be honest, there was never, obviously, once I was turning 18, 19, then started venturing through the North American Hockey League, I knew that college hockey was my route. But for me, my focus more so at the time was just more year to year. I was bouncing around a lot, and it was more so just because I'd never really found a home or never really got my stride in playing in junior hockey. So I wasn't so much, I can't wait to go play Division I. It's just more so I was just trying to stay afloat in those leagues. When I went down to Omaha, I thought that my 16U year would be my only year. Ended up having to stay another year there. Was lucky enough to land a roster spot in Dallas with the Lone Star Brahmas. Was just trying to stay afloat there. Ended up getting traded. I was traded or cut, that's the fancy word for it. And then ended up getting sent to Aston, where then again, I was just trying to stay afloat and kind of caught my stride there. So, and that's where I actually got my commitment out of Union, is that once I finally found a home with the Aston Rebels in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that's where the dream of playing college hockey really started to settle in for me.
What was it that drew Union to you and you to Union? I mean, obviously, hindsight being what it is, I don't think you could have made a better decision in terms of the way your athletic career's gone, but I would imagine the academic part of it as well. Being in Philadelphia and Union, I believe, is pretty close to that, if I'm not mistaken. Did they get a lot of eyes on you? What was your impression of them when they approached you and just showed some interest?
So They are close. They're about 4 hours from each other. I actually first started getting in contact with the staff here at Union at the North American Hockey League Top Prospects Weekend. And that was in Michigan, actually. So although we were close geographically, the initial contact came through that league event. And then afterwards, we just kind of kept in contact through that recruiting process. And for me, with Union too, at the time, they have a great history of goalies coming through and being successful and playing on. I believe when I committed, they were 2 or 3 years removed from a national championship. Which is extremely impressive for a school that doesn't have scholarships. There are 1 of 10 schools that don't have scholarships. And also being a small liberal arts school, we only have about 2,600 students here, I believe. So just the combination of the two, and then winning the national championship, and then me being a goalie, like I said, that has always just been treading water, finally finding a home in Aston and Philadelphia, or in Aston Rebels in Philadelphia. Getting that opportunity, it was just almost a no-brainer. So, and like you said too, it was one of the better decisions I've ever made.
Very, very cool to see how that goes. Cause obviously there's, the USHL, there's the NAHL, and, the NA probably getting a little less, at least here, exposure. It's, in terms of competition, the USHL and the BCHL obviously compete for players a lot. Right. What was it like playing in the NAHL? Obviously, lots of good hockey players have come from there. The Vipers have seen a great goaltender a year or two before you got there in Andrew Shortridge, who was in the NA, came to Vernon, had a great season, and then moved on to obviously a great college and into his professional career. What is the hockey and caliber like in the NA?
It's good. It's actually funny you mentioned Shortridge. So him and I actually competed against each other for his last 2 years. He was at Quinnipiac. I'm at Union. We're both in the same conference. So very, very familiar with him, knew him when I was at Vernon, all the good things that all his former teammates said about him. So that's that. But with the North American Hockey League, it's a unique league, especially where I was coming from. It was the first year that division was running. It was the NAL East, and there was only 4 teams. There's a lot of history of that league being a lot older, a lot bigger, a little bit less skilled, but a lot more gritty, which does help goalies in a sense sometimes. Like for me in my situation where I'm just trying to find my game a little bit, it's probably best that I'm not going up against first, second round draft picks every night. So that's why I think, and for maybe everyone out in BC that isn't necessarily familiar with the league, it's also very successful with goalies. Obviously, you mentioned Shorty. So I think that's part of the reason. But and I think for my experience too, that's probably about accurate, I'd say.
You in 2016-17, you end up in the USHL with Youngstown. And we've seen this before, and I'm not sure what you're allowed to or what you feel comfortable saying, but a scenario where you've got your college commitment, obviously the college wants you to play. You end up in a town where maybe there's a goalie who's on fire and eating up some of the starts, but you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm 19, I need to get in there. And an opportunity maybe presents itself to go play somewhere else. And I think I've got that story semi-right when it comes to how you ended up here. What was it like in the first, month or two with Youngstown? How challenging was it to try get in there? And maybe walk us through the development with how you ended up here and, just the process from 1 to 2. Yeah,
for sure. So me having my commitment to Union at the end of the year prior, which was when I was in Aston, I felt like I still had 1 more year of junior left before I went to school. I felt like I had proved myself enough in the North American Hockey League, and I thought it was time for me to challenge myself and take the next step to the United States Hockey League. And I was drafted pretty high to Youngstown, and they wanted me to come in pretty badly. And so I decided to leave Aston, go there, and it was a train wreck. Like I went and I just wasn't good. I only played 6 games there, and I honestly think I probably only finished half of them. So like, train wreck is probably the best way to describe it. But then my goalie partner too, his name was Ivan at the time, and he was off to a hot start. And 6 games into the season, we could just tell like he was the guy. I wasn't. But I didn't want to be in an organization that I wasn't going to play my year going into college. And the staff there at Youngstown too was kind of on the same page. So they facilitated the move for me to come to Vernon, come help compete with Ty Taylor for that number 1 job on that good team we have. And I'm sure we'll probably get into that next. But so yeah, that's kind of where my story went then. So it's Vernon was basically my saving grace after that train wreck of a start. So
what goes through your mind when that happens? I mean, they say that, 90% of this game is mental. And I would imagine that's almost got a magnifying glass on it for a goalie, where every mistake that you make, good chance that puck's behind you resulting in a goal. You can't really hide those mistakes, the nerves, whatever the case was. In hindsight, what were you able to sort of figure out what it was? Was it the move to the USHL? I can't imagine it was just strictly, an eye opener for talent. When you sort of reflect on it, was there something that stood out as to why that 6-game experiment just didn't work?
I'm sure there's a lot of reasons. You're right there. The mental part for me, it wasn't great. The change in towns. I loved my billet house. I loved the guys there. They're all good. I just wasn't playing well. And like I said, I've always been a kid that's always been kind of treading water in my stops along the way to where I am. And I left Aston, which was finally a home for me. And then I went to a spot where, again, I wasn't just treading water, I was sort of drowning in it. And so there was a lot of self-doubt for me at that time, where it's like, oh, damn, like maybe it was that 6-month stretch I had in Philly, just, a hot streak sort of thing. So I was kind of dealing not only with the adjustment from the better league, the new town, the new team, but also kind of a bit of that self-doubt. So then the trade for me to Vernon was just a fresh start. And thankfully it worked out, because that seems to be what I needed.
Amazing to think too, like you're from a small town in Minnesota, you've played, at different parts of the road, but this would be your first and only stop in Canada. What'd you know about the BC League when you came out here? Obviously the move out here was facilitated. It was felt that this would be a good opportunity for you to get some of the ice. What did you know about it coming in?
To be completely honest, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I know, actually, it's a funny story, actually. So after my year in Aston, when I was deciding whether to stay in Philly or to go to Youngstown, Coach Mark Ferner actually reached out to me and asked if I was interested maybe in going to the BCHL or going to Vernon. And at that time, I just told him like, hey, sorry, like, no, it wasn't just on my plate. So I think, looking back at it in hindsight, that's probably why I ended up getting to Vernon, because of the interest that previous summer. But like, long answer, I knew nothing. Everything was a complete surprise. I knew that BC was very pretty. That's all.
That tends to be the trade. That's the trend. Whenever they get here, I remember interviewing an American player from New York who came over, and he said, "What's your favorite rink to go to?" And he said, "Trail." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." Well, yeah, the drive was really pretty. And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, there's that. It's just completely an eye-opening experience." The story, I don't know if I'll ever forget this, but the story of your first couple of games here is pretty amazing. You arrive in late November, 2016. The team embarks on one of the strangest 3-game road trips I've ever been on, where we start in Wenatchee. You're expected to go to Coquitlam and Langley. And at the time, Wenatchee, offensively and in the regular season was a juggernaut. And, we did an interview. We did one of these Viper Voices with Ty Taylor, and he remembers this too. He got the start in Wenatchee. It didn't go very well for him. The first 40 minutes, the team didn't play very well. You come in and nobody's really seen you play, or I'm sure you had, other than a couple of practices in the 6 games, you hadn't had a lot of high level competition, and you go into the third period and you stop all 14 that you face. What do you remember about, getting that first opportunity, the first time you got to test the puck, and you did so against a very good Wenatchee team?
It's actually funny they mention that, because now, like, I look back at some of those very pivotal moments in my hockey career, and that most definitely was one of the most pivotal moments. Because, like I said, I'm coming from a team where I was really struggling, not only on the ice, but mentally as well. And then going through the trade process, it is not easy for anyone, especially 19, 20-year-olds. Like, it's tough. And so I'm showing up. I actually had one practice, I believe, before I went on that road trip with the guys. So I'm still meeting everybody, just getting on the bus for the first time. And then just seeing my first game in Wenatchee, like, it was all just brand new. And to think that I jumped in that game and I just played really well. And then I ended up getting the start the next day against Coquitlam. We won that game. I think it was like 10-0 or something like that, but I got a shutout. And all of a sudden I've got 4 periods where I haven't let in a goal. And we played Langley the next day. And I think I was like 2 or 3 minutes from getting the shutout in that game too, but I still played very well. And then, so it was just, for me, just driving back, it's like, okay, like, I'm here. I've proved to these guys, like, I've got what it takes. Proved to myself I got what it takes. I really started to settle down then, feel at home, and then the rest of the year was just kind of history at that point.
And what's interesting about that too is, because I've got the game log open in front, you stopped 14 in relief, you had 18, so not very busy against Coquitlam, 32 of 33. And then sort of looking through the rest of the regular season, there were only a couple of times where you didn't face at least 30 shots, and the numbers sure turned out. It's amazing to think that one weekend, your first weekend away from Vernon, you just get an opportunity to play, and all of a sudden, you give up 1 goal on, again, math's not my friend, but 70 shots, maybe a little less, 1 goal against, that's got to do wonders.
Yeah, it was just so crazy to me, and just about how night and day difference that where I came from to where I went that year. And when I was going through it, I don't even really think I had a chance to really just kind of zoom out and just kind of big picture realize kind of what I was doing. Like, that was the best stretch of hockey I've ever had in my career, and likely will ever have in my career. Not like trying to like gas myself up here, but like, it was insane what I was doing. I couldn't even really believe it.
There are numbers to back it up, and I won't go through them all, but we'll go through a couple. The fourth game you got into was against West Kelowna. You stopped 31 of 32 in a win. The next game you played, it was a loss to Penticton. I think it was 3-1, 3-2, something like that. And then you won 5 straight games. The team just seemed to catch fire, and I distinctly remember the second half of the season was, if not the best. The team maybe only lost 5-6 games down the stretch, and you and Ty. And I wanted to talk about the relationship with Ty as well. I mean, at the time, he was a 17-year-old guy. Never have I seen 2 17-year-olds start the year, but Ty had sort of come into his own a little bit. What was the relationship like with him? Obviously, you had a couple of years as senior, but there had to be some competition in there. What was the relationship like with you and Ty?
The relationship I had, sorry, I'm in an office here. The relationship I had with Ty was great. Looking back, like, he was one of my favorite goalie partners I've ever had. He was a young kid at the time, so I think there was, I think he almost kind of like seeked me out to be a mentor more than I decided to mentor him. He would ask me a lot of questions just about leagues in the United States, college hockey, what I knew about the Western League, even like little things like gear. And that was like right away, which I thought was interesting because, like me as a kid coming in to compete with him, that I think that says a lot about who he is as a person, not to be hostile, and to kind of take that as a learning experience. Like I said, as a 17-year-old, I thought that showed a lot of maturity. So for him doing that to me almost made me feel more settled in. Like, I didn't feel like he was antagonistic towards me for being there. So I was always there to help. always there to, teach things. And obviously he was a great goalie. Like I was learning a ton of stuff from that kid too, but we bonded so well, and we still have a great relationship. We don't talk as much now, but there's still, there's Snapchats every now and again, things of that nature. And I value that relationship that we had a lot. And like I said, I think most relationships between goalie partners should be that way.
At the end of the regular season, you got an opportunity. So when it comes to the all-time, and I don't know if you know this, the all-time stats, when they do goaltender numbers, they do the minimum of 1,200 minutes played. Now, you joined the team in late November. You ended up finishing the regular season with 1,237 minutes. So literally half a game enough to count. And you can look this up anytime on the BCHL all-time stats website. You are the all-time leader in save percentage with a minimum of 1,200 minutes played. You are fourth all-time in goals against average with 1.84. Ironically enough, the next year, Ty would get pretty close to breaking that record. He was right behind you at 1.87. And there's some really good goaltenders on this list. Hunter Miska, who plays for Colorado, was right behind Ty, and Michael Gartag, who obviously had a really good career. And then, I think it helped with Ty too, because that year as well, he ended up tying the league record for shutouts with 7. So you spent 3 months here, 1,237 minutes, and now your name is going to be permanently etched in the BCHL. It's hard to imagine the impact that you had, and that's from a league perspective. The impact that you had here when it came to the fan support. Every time you were announced the first star and you'd come out and the fans would salute you, it always looked like you were having fun. It's amazing that all of that happened in such a small window.
I agree. And it's actually a funny story about the statistics part. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe, there was the goaltender, I think it might have been Conquitlam, who had a great year, and he had like a 936 save percentage or something like that. And the league actually tweeted like, oh, he's going to be third all time on the list. And I was like, damn, like that's a really good save percentage. Like I didn't even think about this. Like I was like, oh, who the hell could have had more on there? So I just like looked up the league list and my name was on it. And I was shocked. I was like, because obviously he only played 1,237 minutes. So on one hand, yeah, that's really cool. But on the other hand too, like that's a huge asterisk. All the other goalies did play a full year, and so we can't take that away from them. So, but I mean, I'll take it. But last point though too, you gotta look back on it, and it's that 3-4 month stretch was the most fun I think I've ever had playing. Just like I said, the success playing in Vernon was awesome. The guys were awesome. We were a great team. We were so close. We ended up losing to Penticton in 7 by a goal or 2, I believe it was. It might not be as memorable to some in hindsight, but like we really caught lightning in a bottle that year, and we were so close to really doing something special.
Well, and there's some moments in there, in the playoffs, you end up playing Trail in the first round, and it's a five game series win. You had one bad game in there where you got the hook, but it just really goes to show you that winning 4 games in a row is extremely difficult, because it was game 4 in Trail. The competition is so good, but this was a good crack. You'd end up playing 12 playoff games. How much fun was it to play? And especially now when fans aren't even allowed in buildings very often. I don't know what it's like down there, but up here, don't even think about having fans. You get raucous crowds in Trail because it was the first time in a while they'd made the playoffs. And then obviously the crowds here. I mean, how exciting was it as a player to get an opportunity to experience that? And did you sort of reflect on it as it was happening? Because not everybody gets the opportunity. It's move right on to the next one. Did you get a chance to reflect?
Right. Absolutely, I did. And I still do. I can confidently say that just when it comes to fan atmosphere, like the BCHL is the best league to get that. I remember playing at Trail for their teddy bear toss night. That was amazing. I remember game 1 against Trail in the playoffs, just the atmosphere there. I actually remember we had a game against Powell River at home when the hometown hockey was in town. and they were giving out tickets to that game. And I think it was the Cal Tire was damn near close to selling out. And just, we ended up losing that game, but there was a time where I just like sat back and was like, whoa, like this is it, you know? And I even think too, this is funny. My favorite memory, I think, from playing in Vernon was our Game 6 win over Penticton, where we won 5-0 at home in front of, again, damn near sold out crowd. And I still, now again, there's still the video, the highlights of that game up on YouTube. And every 4 or 5 months or so, I'll catch myself just going back, just watching that, just kind of reminiscing about it. So yes, I think about it constantly.
And it's interesting you say that, because I was literally just going to bring it up. The attendance that night was just under 3,200, and that series against the V's, you know, they obviously draw really well. You know, you when you have back-to-back games and you've got in a game 7, 4,000 people, in the game 6, you had 3,200 people. That's a lot of people consuming content that you're in front of. But let's talk about the game 6 before we talk about the game 7, because that game stands up as one of the more exciting ones. You guys had your backs against the wall. You'd lost in overtime in game 5. And, you know, from a guy who's called enough game 6s against that team, the V's at times have come into this building and been able to take care of business and either force the game 7 or move on. You guys jumped on them really quick. You know, you played a lot of hockey, but where does that one, game 6, rank in terms of excitement, kind of mixed in with had to win? It was a must win.
Oh gosh, I mean, it's right there. I mean, it ended up being like a 5-0 game. So in terms of, you know, closeness, like maybe not as exciting, but I remember just playing in that, you know, we're up 3-4-0 and it's very calm. And then we as a team just could kind of tell that, you know, like it felt like something special was going on, you know, in front of all those fans. We were just determined to win, and there was nothing that was going to stop us that game. And after we won, it felt like we could have won the Stanley Cup the next day. You know what I mean? Obviously, we ended up going to Penticton 2 days later and losing. That's just hockey. It's how it is. But for me, it's like, I think that's just one of the great things just about just playing in general, is like that feeling I had in game 6 against Penticton, being there with a group of guys that we were all just totally committed to one thing. We didn't believe anyone could stop us. With 3,300 people watching us, it's loud and it's fun, and it's hard to put into words just how exciting it is.
You talked about the game 7 loss. It was 3-1 was the final, you know, really close hockey game all the way through. And that sort of put a bow on your junior career. Were you solely committed to going to college? I guess after the year you had in junior, Union was going to want you anyway. At any point in the back of your mind, did part of you want to, you know, just give it another go? Or by that point, were you're ready to take that next step and get on with the college career?
I mean, it's always been in my head. I wish I could have played that year over and over again in Vernon the rest of my life. Like, don't get me wrong, that was in my head, but it was time for me to go to school. You know, it was time for Ty to kind of step in and do his thing, which he did. And then, you know, it's just how it works. Like, it was great. I wish we could do it all the time, but for me, it was time for a new challenge, and I've loved every second of it. My experience here at Union as well. So yeah, it's just how it works out, and I'm glad it has.
Not every freshman gets the opportunity to play a lot of games. Sometimes they're redshirted, especially in the goalie position, when I think most colleges carry 3 guys. You come in as a 20-year-old. You end up playing 14 games with Union. You go 10-4, which is a great record. Good goals against average, just under 910, or pardon me, 2.32, and a save percentage of just under 910. Were you able to carry that confidence through the offseason, and how did you manage your academic workload along with your athletic workload that you'd end up taking on?
Absolutely. I think without my experience in Vernon, I wouldn't have had nearly the amount of success that I've had here at school. And so, yeah, I do think I carried that over. You know, first year in college hockey, especially for goalies, is always an adjustment. But I was lucky enough, I kind of, in a way, played myself into getting a little bit more minutes. And we actually started that year out 0-5. Then I got a chance to go in, and I won my first 5 games. And that was just great for me. Kind of like how I mentioned earlier, just having that first weekend in Vernon where it's like, all right, I'm here, I've done it. I know I can be here. I know I belong. Just kind of relax a little bit. That same thing sort of happened for me here in Union. So I had my first 5 games, played well. I was a young guy. I was playing underneath a junior. He ended up taking the reins back from me later on in the season. But that was just so great for me to know that I could compete at the college level. Which is, I mean, probably fine too, because like the academics that you mentioned, it is also a part of it. We got to learn how to be students as well. And I think that was probably the best thing for me to get a taste of what college hockey was like, know I could be successful and kind of know how everything works off the ice as well. For me, the next 2 years after that to kind of just take the reins completely and play well.
And you did just that. I mean, you'd end up suiting up for 28 games the year after, save percentage really good. You know, how much did you learn? And again, I mean, you're playing against some of the best that college hockey has to offer. You know, what was the competition like? Obviously, looking at some of the names, I mean, there's some really good players that you played with, and I would imagine played against. What was it like to get a chance to compete against the best of the best when it came to that?
Oh, it's obviously so cool. It's very cool. And it's weird to me now because after having done it, for 4 years, to where I see a lot of those names now on the TV when I'm hanging around doing nothing on a Saturday night. And it's like almost, I don't want to say it's normal because there's always a piece of me like, damn, like this is really happening. But like I said, though, too, we're just watching games like, oh, is so-and-so playing in the NHL. I'm like, oh, I stopped that kid on a breakaway, or, oh, like that kid scored on me 8 times in one game. Like, so that's obviously a very unique part of being able to play at a high level like this. And it's also just very cool too, like getting to play against those kids during their college career. Like college hockey is just like a very unique experience, and a lot of fun, and getting to play against these big time players and in front of thousands and thousands of fans too at these big time schools. It is very cool.
You talk about cool. Well, you kind of put yourself in Roberto Luongo territory last year. You were part of the captaincy group with Union, and I don't think that happens very often. Obviously, people who have been enjoying the interview or get a chance to watch this will understand how personable you are and how much you clearly care about everything. But what did it mean to you to be part of the captaincy group in a position that typically doesn't have that letter associated?
It meant the world to me. Obviously, just knowing that everyone that you work along with day in and day out has that confidence in you was great. To get that from the staff as well. It gives you a real peace of mind. And I'm sure that that's just for anyone that wears the letter, though. And to get it as a goalie, it's cool to think about, right? Like it doesn't happen often. Nice to reflect every now and again. But with that, though, there are also unique challenges. And those have been difficult at times to kind of figure out. But nevertheless, it's just a huge honor, something that not a lot of kids get to do. And I don't take that for granted for a single second.
The world was thrown through a loop essentially 12 months ago when colleges, junior hockey, sports in general, life in general was sort of flipped upside down. And a lot of colleges have had to adapt to that. Some schools opting not to play this year for a 4th year. You have the opportunity, I guess, to finish at Union and then the opportunity to play 1 more year. Is from the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken, you've been allotted another opportunity, a 5th year. The University of Connecticut is where you're going to be finishing your college hockey career. How did that opportunity come available to you?
So here at Union, we were one of the schools that elected not to play due to the pandemic. All players in college hockey were awarded another year of eligibility, I believe, whether or not their team played. So I've obviously got my year. I had the opportunity to transfer out of Union this year and play some games at another school and potentially grad transfer after that. But for me personally, my Union degree is very important to me. Education just in general is something that is extremely important to me. So I elected to stay here at school, given with all the craziness going on with COVID. It just seemed to make more sense to me to just stay here, graduate with my classmates, enjoy my last year at Union, get that degree, and then take the next step. And UConn was obviously where I'm headed. It's exciting. It's Hockey East. Being at Union, I'm the ECAC. I think Hockey East is going to be a different challenge. Coming in and playing on a new team again. Like, luckily, I've some experience with that, and it's most of the time gone well. So hopefully just that translates, I'm very excited. I'm just very excited just to be playing college hockey another year. And we're just so lucky to be doing things like this. And I think just at the end of the day, it's just nice to basically get this experience for 5 years instead of 4, even though everything that's going on in the world.
And at 24, by the time you graduate, so after next year, 23 now, say 24, the dream of playing professional hockey is still around. There's always that stigma that, if you don't get in a certain time, maybe, it's too long. But a lot of NHL teams love the opportunity to get an opportunity to sign a college free agent. We've seen a lot of them go at the age of 24 by the time your college career is finished, I'd imagine. And you've got the degree in your back pocket to fall back on, but an opportunity to maybe make it at the pro level. Is that still a major goal?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it'd be foolish for anyone not to try to ride this out as long as they can, So yeah, that's something I'm working towards. It's something I want to do, and I'm excited to potentially explore. But for me too, like you said, I do have my education in my back pocket. I'm going to be lucky enough at UConn actually to get my master's paid for and done in 1 year. In education, I have plans for my life after hockey. And plans that I'm excited for as well. So even if I do go there next year and it doesn't work out and I'm done playing, I'm excited for the next step of my life, So I'm just very content with the position that I'm in right now. And I'm just trying to enjoy every second before I do have to try to finally make that decision.
Well, we hope you don't have to make that decision for a while and you can enjoy everything that comes at you. Darion, we really appreciate this. Usually the last little segment of this, we like to leave the floor open for you. Again, it was such a small sample size for you here, but you had such a large impact on the fans and the people who got a chance to watch you. Is there anything that you'd sort of like to say as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'm sure my billet family, the Bradners, will probably listen to this. Haven't talked to those guys in a while. I miss them. I appreciate everything that they do and all the billets for the Viper organization. They really help us all out a lot. For any of my former teammates that are maybe listening, I miss them obviously. I hope they're all doing well, and to the Viper fans too. Thank you guys so much. Like I said, my experience in Vernon was so central to not only my just success, but just where my life has gone up to this point. And I reflect a lot about my time in Vernon, and I just miss it all. So thank you, obviously, Grant, for everything you do. Just thank you to everybody that's listening. I miss you all. That's my message.
Darion, we really appreciate this. We look forward to tracking the rest of your career as it goes, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again sometime soon. All the best. Thanks so much.
I hope so. Thank you so much, Graham. Appreciate it.